The Kidnapped Bride. A novel by Dr. A. Ahmed. This is an intriguing story which resonates with love, courage, resilience, and sacrifice. It is about an abducted Christian bride who was stolen by Muslim invaders from South Sudan and sold as a slave in Western Sudan. It has been written in English and translated into Arabic by the author Dr. Ahmed. Copyrights. All rights are reserved. No part of this book may be reproduced, stored in a retrieval system, or transmitted in any form or by any means without the prior written permission of the author, except by a reviewer, who may quote brief paragraphs for a review to be printed in a public newspaper, general magazine, school journal, or university article. This novel is a work of fiction, but the entire story is based on similar happenings which occurred in southern and western Sudan. All names, characters, places, and events are either the product of the author's imagination or used literary. Any resemblance to actual people, living or dead, events or locales is merely coincidental. Chapter 46. Another slave trader is implicated in the slavery trial. By the time the newly wedded couple, Malwal and Olivia, returned to the courtroom, the Southern lawyer had reached the end of the unpleasant confrontation between the Muslim Mujahideen Janjaweed and the Sudanese Robin Hood, Wad Mahira bint Aboud and his Hambata bandits. The audience and the judge are amazed, listening to his narration, as if they were watching a horror movie. Wad Mahira killed some of the bad guys from the Janjaweed and captured Ayan and the rest of the kidnapped Dinka girls. In addition, he took from them the livestock that they had stolen from the south. Fate transferred the captive Dinka girl from the hands of the notorious Mujahideen Muslim raiders and killers to the grip of another, more evil and dangerous Muslim man, Satan Wad Mahira bint Aboud. The same evil, lawless, bloodthirsty Hambati man brought her to the brothels owned and operated by Bint al-Zubair Pasha, and sold her to her as a prostitute and sex slave. On the same day, the stolen Dinka girl was tied up, beaten, raped, and her body burned with a hot iron rod by the evil pimp. She was gang raped by several other men among her clients, who were willing to pay money in prostitution for fucking her helpless prostitutes. Then the daughter of Satan Pasha made between Ayan's breasts the Islamic crescent, a sign of slavery, as if she were a commodity for sale. The freed Dinka girl, Ikalaz, had shown the perpetual Islamic crescent tattoo on her naked body to my wife, Mary, in the bathroom of our residence. My beloved Christian wife, Mary Akal, is sitting there, and if the court needs her testimony, she is ready to provide it. Everyone looked at Mrs. Akal, who was sitting near Ikalaz. When the judge did not ask for the testimony of the southern wife, her Christian husband continued to speak. The evil woman, sitting in this hall, used a hot rod to make another permanent tattoo around the pussy of Ayan after shaving her black pubic hair from it. She did this to the girls who were sold to her as slaves by the Hambati man, Wad Mahira bint Aboud, and other Arab Janjaweed, which is exactly what her evil great-grandfather, Al-Zubair Pasha Wad Rama did. He was the so-called great hero in Sudanese history, who used to do that tattoo on the naked bodies of our stolen African young women in the past. The southern lawyer expected that the judge, or one of the other listeners, would challenge him on his performative opinions about Al-Zubair Pasha. When no one challenged or condemned him, he continued his story. In less than a month, my client Ikalaz was subjected to rape and forced sex acts by more than 300 men. She also told me that in her first week, she had to have sex with more than 30 men per day. Once again, Mr. Akal exaggerated his numbers with the intention of increasing the anger of the judge, the juryman, and perhaps even the public, so that Bint Zubair Pasha could either be hanged to death or sentenced to maximum imprisonment and, as he hoped, killed inside the courtroom by the angry African public in vigilante justice. For this reason, she pushed my client Ayan to the point of contemplating suicide by burning her pure body, which is being violated and desecrated every day by dozens of men. After torturing her psychologically and physically and earning a lot of money by selling her body into prostitution, the daughter of Al-Zubair Satan Pasha came out with the drama of Abdullah Deng and his Christian daughter, Suzanne. Any good girl in my client's place would have chosen the Imam's house over brothels. Al-Zubair Pasha's daughter threatened Ayan before sending her to the Imam's house. She told her that her dangerous gangsters would be sent to watch Maulana's house, and if she tried to escape, these evil men would catch her and take her back to her brothels, slavery, and liquor bars. Mr. Akal stopped talking and looked at Bint al-Zubair. Before he could make an unpleasant remark, or carry out the punishment he thought she deserved, the judge intervened. Please, Mr. Akal, remember what I told you a few minutes ago. Inappropriate comments or rude remarks against the accused are not allowed in this court. Tell us what your client, the Southern girl, Ikhlas, told you, and leave the matter to the court to decide. Mr. Akal said, raising his hands in a plea, I seek refuge in God from the old devil who sits in this hall with his obese adulterous woman, who also resembles the wife of the Antichrist. The judge did not know whether to consider this a supplication to God, an observation, or a curse on the accused. For this reason he said, O God, give my soul more days before he becomes silent again. The Southern lawyer continued, my client was trapped like a slave inside the house of the adulterous Imam. She worked every day as an unpaid maid from sunrise until sunset, and at night she was raped by an old, dirty man who was older than her grandfather. She no longer has a home or family in Sudan. The cursed Muslim Arab Janjaweed wiped out her entire family and killed other villagers from the Dinka tribe, including women, children, and the elderly. If she had escaped from the house of Satan and gone to the detention camp for Southern Christian refugees in the city of Babanusa, we all know what would have happened to her. The Arab Janjaweed might raid the refugee camp, kill her, or kidnap her again, enslave her, gang rape her, and then sell her as a prostitute or slave to work for free on the slave farms. Once again, the judge did not understand the phrase, the house of Satan, whether it was an insult to the accused Imam or an attack on the daughter of Al-Zubair Pasha, so he prayed another prayer for patience. There is no objection to your ruling, O God, and I ask you, Mr. Akal, to quickly present your defense and try to be brief and avoid unnecessary details, observations, and sarcasm. I'm done with my defense, Mr. Akal said quickly. He only added his advice to the court. I ask this court to impose the maximum punishment on the cursed devil, Maulana Abdul Satan Iblis al-Mahdi, and on the former prostitute who herself turned into a pimp and slave trader, the daughter of Satan Pasha. Before the judge could disqualify him or remove him from the courtroom, Mr. Akal reached his seat with one long step and sat down next to his wife, Mary, and his client Ikhlas. Is there anything the suspect's lawyer wants to say to the court? It is clear that the length of this case negatively affects the judge's psychology. He's tired of the whole thing and wants to get over it and give his final judgment. Maulana's Muslim lawyer said as he sat down, Yes, Your Honor. Everything that the Christian lawyer, Mr. Akal, narrated to the court had nothing to do with the defendant. The accused, the blessed Maulana Sheikh Abdul Razak, who is the great-grandson of Imam Muhammad Ahmed al-Mahdi, is innocent of responsibility for the crimes of slavery and prostitution committed against the Southern girl, Ikhlas. He is innocent, just as the wolf was innocent of the blood of our prophet Joseph, son of Jacob, who was the father of Bani Israel. He was deceived by a suspected woman sitting in this courtroom. The court is going to decide that, not you, the judge said. Then His Majesty turned to one of the jurors and whispered some words in his ear. Before he could convey the same secret to the other jurors, he heard someone screaming in the courtroom. Mawal, who got back to his feet, shouted, Your Honor, the judge, I have something to add to those heinous crimes committed against my Dinka wife, Ayan Majak. The judge was amazed at his boldness and did not know whether to tell him to speak or to be silent. There is another culprit in this conspiracy against my wife Ayan, who should be brought to justice and punished for his heinous crime. Who is that person? Asked the judge, being more interested than the others. Malwal answered with pleasure, Haj Radwan al-Taishi. He was the leader of the Arab Janjaweed Muslim Mujahideen, who raided the village of Tawila and kidnapped my Dinka bride, Ayan Majak, killed her family members and other villagers, stole girls and livestock, and brought them to the place where they met the Hambadi bandit Wad Mahira bint Abood. He stole their captive Dinka girls, plundered the cattle and their horses, and killed 10 of them. How did you know that? The judge felt that something else big was about to happen. My wife, Olivia, and I recently chased him from another Dinka village and arrested one of his men. That captured Arabman told us about him, and what happened to the captive Ayan, and the other kidnapped Dinka girls. If the judge and jury don't believe me, then my 2 wives Ayan and Olivia will expose him. The judge was not surprised that Malwal claimed to have 2 wives, as he himself, as a Muslim man, had 3 wives in his family at the same time. But he became extremely interested in the new developments in the case. Accordingly, he took his gavel, hit his table, and announced the issuance of an arrest warrant order for the immediate detention of Haj Radwan al-Taishi, and considered the trial postponed until the next session. Then he took his gavel and hit his table again and shouted, "The court has been postponed." Chapter 47. The difficult choice for the American groom. The arrest and involvement of the evil Janjaweed leader, Haj Radwan al-Taishi, in the Imam's enslavement of the kidnapped Dinka bride, caused a great uproar in the city, and the news spread everywhere, until it crossed the borders of Sudan, into the country of Chad, neighboring the Darfur region. He was arrested on serious charges such as armed invasion, raid, murder, gang rape, forced deportation, and slavery. The crime of slavery committed by the Imam began to seem like nothing compared to those heinous crimes committed by the wealthy Arab man, Haj Radwan al-Taishi. This time, the court scheduled the hearing on a public holiday on Friday, and reserved the city's largest hall for the historic trial. Surprisingly, slavery did not become a genuine issue for the court, until the Dinka groom Malwal mentioned Haj Radwan and dragged him into it. Before that, the public viewed Maulana's crime as merely sexual exploitation of a beautiful young southern girl. What Imam Abdul Razak did is a common racist practice in Sudan. For example, Eritrean refugee girls in the eastern province of the cities of Kassala and Gadaref and the capital city of Sudan, Khartoum, face more serious sexual harassment and abuse than Ikalas faced in the home of the adulterous Imam, Sheikh Abdulrazak al-Mahdi. What made Maulana's case more serious was his appeal to the religious authority to justify his possession of a slave. Haj Radwan's case is considered serious because he trades in people just as a merchant trades in goods. For many years, the Arab Janjaweed have been raiding southern villages to capture women and children, bringing them to work in their homes and fields, and herding their livestock without pay. Then they started selling these girls to Bint al-Zubair Pasha as prostitutes or slave captives in war. ISIS terrorist Mujahideen in Syria and Iraq did the same evil to the Yazidi girls and sold them in the slave market in the city of Mosul. They provided religious justifications for their evil actions from the Holy Quran and authentic hadiths of the Prophet Muhammad to show that the final messenger of Allah and his companions did the same thing with the captive women and children of those infidels who invaded their lands and defeated them, whether they were polytheists, Jews, Christians, Persians, or Hindus. Throughout the long history of Islam, Islamic Mujahideen fighters have invaded, enslaved, raped, and sold captives from so-called impure infidels who were supposedly enemies of God and his infallible messenger Muhammad bin Abdullah bin Kilab. Some people of the Darfur region considered that the crimes of Haj Radwan exceeded the crimes of the great Sudanese Muslim Sultan Ali Dinar. Actually, the people of Darfur exaggerated their claims, because the crimes of Sultan Ali Dinar can only be compared to the heinous crimes of genocide committed by the tyrant Adolf Hitler and his evil Nazi German soldiers. Although Sultan Ali Dinar lived a century ago, some Sudanese tribes hide from him until today on the top of Jebel Mara. He was the most evil and genocidal man to ever walk the surface of planet Earth. Half of the tribes of Darfur, Kordofan, and the Nuba Mountains were killed by his evil Muslim Mujahideen invaders. However, he was a deeply religious Muslim man, and every year he sent the holy coverings to the Black Kaaba in the holy city of Mecca. Legend has it that he used hot chili powder as eyeliner kohl on his eyes. No one was allowed to look at his terrifying face due to the red mascara on his sparks-flying eyes. He killed anyone who looked into his red eyes, from which sparks of flames flew, as if he were a fire-breathing human dragon. In any case, the story of Haj Radwan's arrest was colored and changed as it passed from one mouth to another before he was brought to the courtroom. By the time of his trial, a few weeks later, his case had developed into an incredibly terrible story. Everyone believes that he amassed all his vast wealth through the slave trade. Every year he goes with his militiamen to the south and captures thousands of young Christian women and brings them to the western region and sells those southern girls to the rich. Due to their outstanding beauty, the Dinka girl Iqalas was sold to Imam Abdul Razak al-Mahdi, the Azanda girl Olivia to Bint al-Zubair Pasha, and the Shuluk girl Ayan to the late Hambadi Manwad Mahira bint Aboud. The trial grew to include not only Mawal's two wives Olivia and Iqalas, but also a third beautiful southern girl called Ayan. So on the appointed day, many young men came to the court to see the three Christian beauties, Olivia, Iqalas, and Ayan. People thought that Iqalas and Ayan were the names of two different beautiful girls. In the 2 weeks leading up to the trial of Haj Radwan Taishi, Mawal, Ayan, and Olivia have to deal with their own serious dilemma. On the day, the American groom found his kidnapped Dinka bride who had been missing for more than a year. The girl freed from slavery and sexual exploitation followed her Christian lawyer out of the courtroom, with eyes full of tears and a bleeding heart. In front of Mr. Akal, his wife, Mary, and Mrs. Olivia, Ayan Majok fell to her knees and cried like a child when she met her Dinka husband, Mawal Dang. She thanked heaven and earth for her mercy, and for bringing her husband from America to save her from the fangs of the predatory wolf who disguised himself as a good citizen and the imam of the biggest mosque in town. When Ayan met her Dinka husband, only then did her American groom, Mawal, begin to think about the inevitable bitter consequences. He could not imagine, even for a moment, separating himself from his beloved Azanda bride, Olivia, who by that time had come to mean everything to him. At the same time, his sacred Christian marriage vow and commitment to his family and community do not allow him to abandon his Dinka bride, Ayan, after he finds her. Therefore he found himself in a dilemma that he could not solve on his own. It was Olivia who broached the subject at the hotel when the newlywed lovers returned from the home of the southern lawyer Mr. Akal. "I know what's bothering you, Mawal," Olivia said to him sadly. Her lover and groom could not respond to her words. "I was disturbed by that too, since I recognized your missing Dinka bride, Ayan, inside the courtroom. Appropriate and correct what you should do. I have already thought of a solution. Don't ever think about leaving me or imagine that I will leave you one day," Mawal shouted. Olivia put her hand on her lover's shoulder. "I know, my dear Mawal, you love me, and I love you too. But your duty as a good Christian husband requires you to take your first wife, Ayan, and return to your new homeland, America. She has no one to take care of her if she leaves her. As for me, I have parents, living siblings, relatives, friends, and a home in the South. I have a school education and long practical experience in the nursing profession. I worked as a nurse at Juba General Hospital, the largest hospital in the South. So I can take care of myself, but the Dinka girl Ayan has none of these qualifications. Moreover, she has an exceedingly small baby girl, Sakina, who needs shelter, and a stepfather as well to adopt her as his stepdaughter." Mawal's face wrinkled and he replied, "Everything you said may seem true, but still, I can never leave you. I love you so much, Olivia." He added in a softer whisper, as if he were afraid that someone would hear his words, "And I don't love Ayan. You know this fact. Otherwise, neither of us would have fallen in love with the other." That night, neither the Azanda bride, Olivia, nor the Dinka groom, Mawul, could sleep or close their eyes and continue discussing their dilemma until the morning. At the end of their discussion, after exchanging thousands of words and crying a flood of tears, the beloved Azanda girl was able to convince her Dinka lover to leave her and go with his first wife, Ayan, to the United States of America in the New World and live together happily ever after and give birth to sons and daughters. When Mawul finally accepted the difficult choice, Olivia moved out of their shared bed. She said their separation should begin immediately. Mawul rejected such an immediate separation and preferred a gradual severing of their intimate souls. First, they had to separate the beds they were sleeping in, then rooms, houses, and finally, they had to live in two separate countries, Sudan and America. Once she convinced her lover, Olivia approached the freed Dinka girl and begged her to stay with her holy Christian husband. Ayan also showed some resistance and innocently suggested that the two of them share Mawul as a polygamous husband as Muslim women do. Olivia strongly rejected this idea, insisting that the bride, Ayan, and her groom, Mawul, live together as husband and wife. She also reminded Ayan that they are Christians, and there is no room for polygamy in Christianity. When the new arrangement was finally imposed on husband Mawul, Olivia sent him to stay with his first wife at Mr. Akal's house. One day before the final session of the trial, the newly reunited bride and groom, Ayan and Mawul, spent their first wedding night and had sex together. It was a wonderful night for the Dinka bride, Ayan, but the American groom, Mawul, felt as if his soul had been split in two. One remained with Olivia, and the other united with Ikalaz. He understood that polygamy in Islam is not a heinous crime against the first wife, but rather separation and painful torment for the husband himself. It's hard to describe the pain Olivia went through during her first night in the hotel room without Mawul. The next morning, before they went to court, the American groom Mawul called the Sudanese priest and the president of the Sudanese Association in the USA and told them the good news. He promised to return to his new homeland soon, America, with his newly found bride, Ayan, whom he got after a bloody fight against evil monsters called the Arab Muslim Mujahideen Janjaweed. He did not reveal to them over the phone any details about how and where he found his missing Dinka bride, Ayan Majok. Chapter 48. Final ruling of the Criminal Court on Slavery. Never before has the criminal court in the city of El Fasher become so crowded with people, as happened on the day that the evil slave trader Haj Radwan al-Taishi was brought to justice. He is accused of committing serious crimes, such as invasion, raiding, armed robbery, murder, kidnapping, plundering, arson, destruction, rape, infanticide, genocide, and slavery in its various forms, such as owning slave farms, kidnapping African young women, enslaving them, and selling them in secret slave markets to Arabs and brothels for the daughter of Al-Zubair Pasha. It is worth mentioning and repeating that some African residents of the provinces of Darfur and Kordofan, and the citizens of the 99 Nuba Mountains believe that the serious and brutal crimes committed by the wealthy man, Haj Radwan, even outweigh the evils of the Sultan Ali Dinar of Darfur state. Of course, as we said before, the people of Darfur, Kordofan, and the Nuba Mountains exaggerated the comparison because the devil Satan Ali Dinar cannot be compared to anyone except perhaps the evilest tyrant in the history of mankind, Adolf Hitler. According to a recent report, there are still people living on the top of the lofty mountain, that is, Jebel Mara, because they are afraid to descend for fear of the evil Muslim Sultan Ali Dinar, who died a century ago, and the earthworms ate the remains of his impure bones. The government and police in Darfur tried several times to convince them of his death, and the descent of his evil spirit into hell, but none of them believed the news. They said they could believe the devil was dead but not the genocidal monster. Some of them went on record by saying, even if God died, the Antichrist, who is Satan incarnated as the evil Muslim Sultan Ali Dinar, could never die. For them, he appears as the accursed devil who removes the affliction of the Holy Quran on their innocent ancestors. The horrific stories they hear in their homes from their grandmothers, in sermons in the mosques of their imams, and on television and radio from their religious leaders and teachers in schools, have convinced them beyond any doubt that Ali Dinar is an eternal God just like Allah. He has both divine and devilish qualities. He was a pious Muslim man who used to send the sacred coverings of the holy Black Kaaba annually, and was Satan who killed thousands of innocent people every year. So he was three in one, a human, a devil, and a god. He was an evil and impure trinity. Therefore he is eviler than Satan and stronger than God. Some religious scholars and imams of mosques in El Fasher city did not condemn Haj Radwan al-Taishi for his practice of raiding the cities and villages of the Christian infidels, because the Prophet Muhammad, may God bless him and grant him peace, was an invader and conqueror who, along with his mujahideen companions, launched raids against the immoral infidels, killing men, captivating women, and sleeping with captives or their slaves, prisoners of war without marriage, as right-hand possession Jawari. And all his blessed companions, followers, and followers of the followers continued to invade countries, tribes, and other nations after him until Islam spread throughout the world through jihad for the sake of God by the tip of the sword until they reached Spain in the west and India in the east. Therefore, raiding the cities and villages of the southern Christian infidels is a good prophetic sunnah, and therefore it is not permissible to condemn the ardent Muslim leader Haj Radwan for commemorating this blessed sunnah. Invasion of the infidel countries is called in Islam jihad al-Tawb, and compulsory obligation for every Muslim man until the Day of Judgment. The Prophet Muhammad said whoever doesn't carry out jihad against infidels for spreading the light of Islam, or doesn't tell other Muslims of their duty for jihad dies as an infidel hypocrite. In his authentic hadiths, the Prophet Muhammad also recommended killing the infidel men of the defeated country or tribe if they refuse to convert to Islam, enslaving their women and children, and having sex with their free women without marrying them. Since the Prophet practiced invading, conquering, enslaving, and having sex with infidel women, Haj Radwan al-Taishi cannot be convicted of conquering and enslaving infidel Christian Dinka women as well. By convicting him, the criminal court in the city of El Fasher has indirectly condemned the Holy Prophet Muhammad and the obligation of jihad in Islam, the religion of peace, and all Muslims. For the Sudanese people, slavery has always been defined as the practice through which enslaved people are sold into the slave markets just as livestock and goods. Therefore, the evil invading practices and enslavement practiced by the Arab Muslims are not considered slavery. Every year, Muslim Janjaweed militiamen attack villages in South Sudan and Darfur, killing men, burning huts, stealing livestock and property, tying up women and children, taking them as captives, and forcing them to work in houses and farms without pay, rape girls, torture children, and force them to convert to Islam. However, all of this is not considered slavery. When Imam Abdul Razak al-Mahdi shouted from the rooftops that he had a Christian slave girl, he converted her to Islam and impregnated her outside of marriage. Haj Radwan al-Taishi also stole Dinka girls from the south and sold them to the daughter of Zubair Pasha. The public protested, and the law intervened. In any case, the trial began with the reading of the formal accusation that included the crimes of the third accused slave trader, Haj Radwan. He is accused of invasion, armed robbery, murder, rape, and slavery. His lawyer immediately responded to these accusations. The new lawyer, who is also an Arab Muslim, like the two lawyers of the Imam Abdul Razak al-Mahyadi and Bint al-Zubair al-Basha, said, "Your Honor, the judge, and the honorable juryman, everything stated in the formal accusation against my client, the accused, Haj Radwan al-Taishi, is incorrect. My client has vehemently denied these accusations and insisted that he has never visited South Sudan in his entire life. Moreover, he did not see the young Dinka man, Malwal, who he claimed fought against him and killed some of his men, nor the Dinka girl, Ikalaz, who mentioned in her statements that some Muslim Arab Janjaweed attacked her village, Tawila, killed her people and brought her by force to this city. Then she was sold as a slave or a captive prisoner of war." Malwal said in his testimony that he arrested one of Haj Radwan's men, the captive man mentioned my client's name, and that he was the leader of the raid on one of the Dinka villages. When the police asked him to show them the captured Arab man, he said that the late Al-Hambadi man Wad Mahira bint Aboud killed him. I do not believe that this criminal court can accept the words of a Southern Christian citizen and convict an innocent and righteous Arab Muslim citizen like my client, Haj Radwan al-Taishi. So how do we accept the testimony of two Christians against Muslim men such as the Imam of the greatest mosque, the Honorable Maulana Abdul Razak al-Mahdi, the wealthy businessman Haj Radwan al-Taishi, and the late, greatest embodiment of all time, the grandson of Mahira bint Aboud, the mother of our Sudanese Muslim nation? Objection, Your Honor, shouted Mr. Akal. On what basis is your objection? Asked the judge. We have not only Mawal's statements, but also the testimony of his second wife, Olivia, and now his first wife, Ayan, who also identified Haj Radwan al-Taishi as the criminal leader of the Arab Janjaweed invasion who came to her village, Tawila, and committed the most heinous crimes against her people. These are the atrocities she saw committed against her family and other Dinka people. She was captured and other girls from the Dinka tribe were captured on the basis that they became captives of war, which Islam allows for Muslim invaders of the lands of Christians who are considered impure infidels. Then Haj Radwan brought her as a captive slave girl to the Darfur province until the bandit Manwad Mahira bint Aboud took her from him by force. The defense lawyer said, well, if my Muslim client had stolen the Christian girl Ikhlas from a Dinka village, why did she run away from him to the house of Bint al-Zubair Pasha? According to Bint al-Zubair Pasha's statement to the police, Ikhlas entered her huts one day and asked to work as a paid maid. No one ever claimed to have seen her in the hands of Haj Radwan. The court has no evidence to prove that my client took the Dinka girl Ayan Majak from the south. The court also has no evidence that my client sold the girl as a prisoner of war to Bint al-Zubair. The court cannot convict my client based on the words of three Southern Christians. Firstly, the Southern girl, Ikhlas, was not a slave, but rather a paid blackmailer, hired to carry out an illegal act against one of the righteous saints, Imam Abd al-Razak. Secondly, Mawal and Olivia had not met Haj Radwan face to face before today. Accordingly, I ask this esteemed court to drop these false accusations against my defendant, Haj Radwan al-Taishi. After Haj Radwan's lawyer returned to his seat, Bint al-Zubair Pasha's lawyer came forward. He did not add anything new except that he confirmed what the first lawyer said, that the Southern girl, Ikhlas, came to Bint al-Zubair's huts of her own free will, and was therefore not a captive slave who was sold to her by the late al-Hambadi Manwad Mahira. In addition, he rejected the accusation that Bint al-Zubair had commercial connections in practicing slavery with the late bandit Manwad Mahira bint Aboud and Haj Radwan al-Taishi. He challenged Bint al-Zubair's confession of sending Ikhlas to Maulana's house to seduce him, entice him into adultery, and impregnate her outside Islamic marriage bond. The Imam proved to this court by presenting a legal marriage contract that he married her according to the holy book of God, the Quran, and the blessed Sunnah of his infallible Prophet Muhammad, and she is still his legal Muslim wife, and she became pregnant and gave birth to a daughter as his lawful spouse, not his slave girl. Such a false confession by Bint al-Zubair Pasha must have been placed in her bleeding mouth under torture by the police interrogators during their harsh interrogation with batons. The Dinka girl, Ikhlas, said in her confessions that she left the huts of Bint al-Zubair and joined the Imam's house as a paid maidservant of her own free will. She admitted, biting her tongue, that she had used a fraudulent Southern man named Abdullah Dang to deceive the holy Imam Abdul Razak and his virtuous wife until she was hired as a paid maid. For these reasons, the lawyer also asked the court to lift the false charges of sexual blackmail and adultery against his client, the chaste and honorable woman, Bint al-Zubair Pasha. The Southern lawyer, Mr. Akal, was then given the opportunity to question the three suspects or refute the defense and arguments of their three Muslim lawyers. The Christian lawyer tried in every feasible way to refute their defense, but he could not. He was unable to successfully establish links in the practice of slavery, blackmail, and adultery between Haj Radwan al-Hambadi, Wad Mahira bint Aboud, Bint al-Zubair Pasha, and Imam Abdul Razak. The murder of the evil bandit Wad Mahira bint Aboud, at the hands of the brave Azanda girl, Olivia, the so-called Jamal, who had uncircumcised pussy, made it difficult for the southern lawyer to prove that he was the one who stole the Dinka captive girl, Ayan alias Iqalas, from Hajradwan and sold her as a sex slave to Bint Alzabir Pasha. He tried to convince the court that these four people worked together in the slave trade. Unfortunately, the court found that his arguments did not support the statements of Iqalas, Mawal, and Olivia. Accordingly, the criminal court acquitted the three defendants of all charges, especially charges of slavery, extortion, and adultery. Rumors spread among the African Shamashas who were angry at the court's unfair ruling, but their authenticity cannot be proven or denied, that the wealthy Manhaj Radwan, the rich lady pimp Bint Alzabir Pasha, and the parliamentary representative Syed Al-Sab, son-in-law of Imam Abd al-Razak, had met before the trial and agreed to pay huge bribes to the main judge and the court jurors. When the cash reached the hands of these Arab Muslim judges, serious charges were dropped, and the three Muslim perpetrators were acquitted of their heinous crimes in honor with their heads held up high.